Oh, then you,
they won't, it's a
Right.
quiet zone.
You
But we
can
have-
apply for it.
right,
When-
It's a possibility.
Right, but you have to have the quad gates first before it could even be a
So that would
possibility.
fall for the increase in the cost because
Right, I
we
mean,
put quad
is
gates
it
in line.
400,000, something like that?
We were looking at
Yeah.
I also have a
It
comment
would.
about a sound wall because
Do you know any
we've
donors?
lived here long enough that
Maybe.
when they put the sound walls up along Bay Shore,
yeah,
we got a lot more sound.
yes,
Yeah,
So, and we're a
That
long
tends
way
to
from
happen.
you
it.
gotta be real careful about
yep.
it.
Well, that's a function of design, isn't it? You could
It
put up
is.
two walls, so that's what I was asking to.
Yeah,
A considerable amount of noise comes from a huge machine moving through air very fast. It
Yes.
is not all diesel or
No.
electrification.
that's
And
right.
they're talking about the possibility of 12 trains an hour. And that was their goal. Now, that did include high-speed rail, which is, as everybody knows, up in the air at this point. Not literally. But people, I mean, you will constantly hear that electrification will just make it quiet. It's not the case. You
It's not the
must
case.
go stand out there when the horn is not being blown, and
Mhm.
it's just the train moving
Mhm.
through at 79 miles an hour. There's a lot of noise. So
Yeah.
that's the facts of it.
I mean, I think our ability to impact a lot of those issues is very limited. And, you know, we will try to incorporate into the plan, you know, suggestions, options, alternates that might be employed to help mitigate some of these measures. And we're certainly describing a level of quality that will make sure that you get the construction on the buildings to mitigate sound while you're inside the buildings. I think beyond that, it's just going to be an ongoing process for the town to continue to talk with Caltrain and, you know, there's, yes.
I don't agree with that last statement you made. You know, I mean, a sound wall to sound wall, reducing sound is reducing sound. I don't know what we're gonna do with Caltrain to reduce sound. It's
I mean,
not-
some of the other issues about what's gonna go there, so that if you do a sound wall,
Yeah.
what are you mitigating for?
So I'd be interested in seeing a couple of designs that would mitigate sound, perhaps on both sides of the track.
Mhm. Yeah, we can look at that.
Question in regards to the corporation yard that's listed there, is that square footage approximately what's there now?
No, it's actually smaller than what's there now, because what's there now isn't very efficient, and they don't quite need exactly what they have. So we actually worked with the Public Works Director to understand exactly what they have to keep there and what kind of space is required. And so the footprint you see represents really what would be needed and what would have to stay. And we can pack it into a much more efficient footprint without having to kind of work around along the tracks and the long skinny configuration it is now.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you said the decision where the corporation yard would be put is going to be a staff decision?
Yeah, a lot of the consensus we heard at a lot of the outreach meetings were, you know, along the lines of, well, we don't feel that we can really dictate where the corp yard goes. It really should be a decision by staff to maintain the most efficient city operations. And so that's how we proceeded with our follow-up, is to understand what does work better from the staff's perspective. And that was the response that we received. And I don't know, George, if you want to elaborate anymore, but that's the path we followed.
Sure, it was more of a conversation about whether it stays within the Civic Center
Right.
master plan or whether it's located
Goes to
somewhere else within
yeah.
town, not necessarily where it is within the
Right.
Civic Center.
Yeah.
So the reason you have it where you have it now is because is the trees, you didn't want to.
Well, we're trying to give some buffer from Maple and these neighbors, and trying to keep the entrance off of this station lane, not off of Maple, and then just trying to utilize some of the tree screening that's already there and then supplement it, you know, so it's just kind of building up. I mean, again, it's about this big, wants to about be in this area, and, you know, it can certainly push and pull a bit. Yes, in the back?
You keep referring to the corporation yard maybe going to
some other place, and the only public land that's owned by the town is the Civic Center site and our park.
Right.
So is that the other option? I mean, that was brought up at a
Yes.
very early meeting.
That was the other option.
I do understand and remember the conversation that there were comments where actually there was this hope that the corporation yard that does exist currently in the park would be made smaller and less prominent. So the question is this sort of a convenient way to get rid of something that you're having difficulty citing given the constraints on the site?
Perhaps I could, to get rid of it now.
I mean, where would it go if it doesn't go?
If it doesn't stay in the Civic Center, you are correct. The only other town
The only other
property
choice is here.
is the park. So the objective is to keep it within the Civic Center.
Okay.
Okay,
And
good.
that's why it's still
Good
on
to
the
hear
plan.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was the conclusion, was to keep it here, because the only other choice was the park.
I had a question about the sound. There's nothing about this that increases
No,
the sound.
No.
So, I don't know why everybody's so exercised about, I mean, sound is the sound.
I mean, we agree that if it can be mitigated and reduced, that would be great. So we're certainly willing to, see what we can do, within the concepts that we've been developing, to provide for that and allow for that possibility. But you are correct, we're not making it worse. It will be improved for any occupants inside any of the buildings because the construction will be better. But yeah, it's still there, and it's still gonna happen as long as the train goes by. But there are things that can be done to mitigate the sound as the train goes by, which, I think good comments we can certainly look at. Yes?
And just because something hasn't been done in the past doesn't mean it shouldn't be done going forward, particularly since we're funding such a fairly large construction. And there are a number of neighbors along that line that would benefit from that. So if you're not in the immediate area, I could understand why you might not be concerned, but if you are, then you might be concerned. As some of us are.
Yes, back.
Back to the corporate yard for a second. So I'm not clear, is it going to, this depiction, is it in the same spot or moving closer towards Reading Park?
So right now, the courtyard kind of snakes sort of, along here. It's kind of, it actually wraps around this tree. There's some buildings, or the other buildings are sort of down here. It kind of lines up along there.
Right.
So what we have done is we've consolidated it into this footprint, and we have moved it closer to Reading Park. The throat doesn't need to be this long. It can be pushed back up close to Station Road. We're trying to figure out the best way to maintain some of the existing trees there, be able to really screen it well. But I think what we're looking at is this is the footprint we've got to work with. This is probably the correct zone to put it in. We do want to try and reclaim and save this heritage tree that, despite its current condition, has survived quite well. And I think that this can be massaged anyway.
But that looks like it's right in Reading Park right now.
It's probably right on the edge of the road.
Edge of what road?
There's a
The
prior-
existing road that comes out this way right now.
There's a prior slide, Cheryl, that does show the,
Well, that's Dinkelspiel, isn't it? So it's between Dinkelspiel and the first house on Maple?
You can kind of see the library here, and so, Dinkelspiel is like over in here.
So it's kind
of in the parking for the library now.
Yeah, it's kind of in that parking area where the spaces are right before you walk into Reading Park.
So Cheryl, right, the upper white image, is that where the courtyard used to be, right up there?
It's here, it kind of wraps around here.
Yeah, but if you're
It's strung out.
consolidating it, did you look at maybe slightly enlarging that white space and not having Station Lane go all the way to the tracks, but have Station Lane go where that line of trees is, right?
Right out
there?
here.
Yes.
One of the things we were trying to accomplish is also straightening out this intersection until you pass beyond Maple. I think that could be one of our questions. If you all feel that intersection is really not that dangerous, and it's not that much of a priority to try and address this with a straighter T section, then I think we could easily work with the courtyard staying in this corner and bring the road back down a little bit.
I prefer that.
Is there a consensus that?
You might take past people who actually live here.
Yeah, so
In that
those of you
neighborhood, how
that
they
live in
feel
this
about it.
neighborhood, we do recognize that this is a less traveled situation, but, it still pose some concern with the offset in the street plus an entrance to a courtyard here right now. How do you guys feel about this corner and where you would prefer to keep the courtyard? And do-
Well, you're pushing the courtyard closer to residential.
You are.
Residential area now. And that's not really what we want. Well, still,
The existing
push it
courtyard
forward.
is right here, this building right here. This is a stand of heritage trees, and it's a very nice evergreen stand that blocks your views of this existing facility. And then back in here, there's a bunch of other, you can probably just make it out, there's a truck right there. The existing road comes right in like this, right in through there. So we can clearly do that. What the trade-offs will be is that we're going to have to remove these trees. The stand of trees that's providing the cover and the blocking of, if we put the courtyard there and shift the road down, unless we really twist the road down dramatically.
You
That
can
would be
twist the road
fine.
down.
Twist the road down.
Bring it down to the
Nobody
heritage.
goes through there fast.
Athens,
Yeah,
all
that-
the curvy roads.
Nobody goes through fast, twisting the road down
I-
further is.
Cheryl, and I kind of go through this area quite a bit, and I'm also on the committee, and I know what you're trying to do, or what we're trying to do as far as cleaning up that intersection. I think the safety issue is more of a pedestrian safety issue than it
Okay.
is a car safety issue.
Okay,
At least that's been my experience.
okay.
Yeah, I think twist the road down to the heritage tree,
And make the entrance to the courtyard off of the Station Lane Road and not off of Maple like it is now? Because like right now,
You don't get in right now. You
Yeah, they don't
can't
get
get
in there.
Yeah, you can't get in. You come in, you basically come in right down through
yeah,
here, and then circulate all the way through.
okay.
But so we can easily, look at bringing the road down through here, and basically we'll just have it tie in. That's its existing alignment,
Yeah,
right where it is now.
Yeah.
No
That's what's
changes.
better.
and we can keep the courtyard in the corner.
Yeah, I like that better.
Yes,
I'm wondering how noisy is the corporation yard?
those of you who live there, those of you who work there, how noisy is it day to day? Every time I've been there, I've never even noticed whether anyone was in it, but I know I'm not necessarily there when trucks are coming and going.
I walk by there not that frequently, but not infrequently. I've never really heard any noise, so I must be
Yeah.
missing it. It must have noise sometime.
Gordon?
We
Gordon
don't,
can
if I can
explain.
address that, we contract out all of our maintenance. Most of the work that they do is out on the streets or in the park. The only thing they do at the courtyard is park their vehicles there
Right.
and then unload them with their green waste goes into a roll-off container, the other waste goes into a roll-off container. The biggest noise you'll hear is when the refuse vehicle comes, once a week, twice a week, whatever, and picks up that roll-off. So there's no, there's no shop there where we're doing maintenance on a vehicle, we're not welding, hammering, or whatever.
And the other thing at the courtyard is like sand for sandbagging? Is that where we
Yes.
keep
Yes.
that? For emergency, for residents to come and bag your sand for flooding issues and stuff? And I know I've used that quite a bit, so it's convenient.
I was gonna say that, Matthew, I actually like where you put the courtyard, and I know nobody's gonna fully agree with me, but if you walk and spend time in that reading park, because of the line of trees, which you can point to there on the bottom right hand of that, it's a very dark,
Yeah,
wet
it is.
spot.
Yes.
It is not fun to hang out. It is, if the line of trees keeps it dark year round.
Yep.
So I actually think that Matthew's put it in the smart place, but that's just my opinion.
Maybe those trees could be pruned up.
What was the concern with the courtyard where it's shown? Why didn't people like it? It's too close to the residents on Maple.
I just think it's
Well,
intrusive.
I thought with the blocking, with the screening, that you ended up taking a huge piece of the parcel for the courtyard and the screening around it. Maybe it's just the bird's eye view, but it looks like an
It's not gonna be
inordinate
any different if you
space.
take that road through there. It's not gonna be any more efficient with that road moving. It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, yeah.
More or less.
You're not gonna have more green space.
It'll be different arrangement of green.
My only concern is about the pedestrian traffic and kids going to school on their bikes, going around that corner. And so I thought that there might be a better traffic with the straight thing. You could see
You could see,
vehicles, and
yeah.
see the kids coming on the
Yeah.
street. But you can mitigate that.
And that is exactly why I did that.
Yeah.
Because it's, you want T's and four-sided intersections, because they're the most safe intersections possible. And this is a logical place where people know they have to stop, it can be controlled. This right now is just pavement surface, there's no curbs, there's no gutters. I have 3 little kids, they ride bikes, terrifying. And
Well, why couldn't you put it between the 2 little heritage trees where there's that parking is? Kind of swoop it down and, you,
No,
further up,
above the library.
above the library, and move the library building. See, put it on the edge of that.
we can see if it would fit in there. We might lose some parking in the process. It's going to get really tight.
Yeah, but there's other places to park. And then it would be further away from the residences.
Yes, in the back,
I was just gonna add a comment. I live on Ashfield and I take my kids to school through there. I do think there is from time to time, there is a little bit of a safety issue with that turn, especially with taxi drivers and airport shuttles and, various contractors that they do use that and they come in there. It doesn't happen all the time, but we see it.
And yes, in the back?
There's some advantages to straightening out that corner. I mean, having a curved street does slow traffic, but the visibility is a bit difficult, and that is the primary route that residents and people in the community from Willows and other areas come down into the Civic Center. So I think that is a good circulation. And when you look at the reading park as it is today, it is a very underutilized space. It's essentially
That's what we've been told
green
throughout the
space,
outreach
but
meetings.
it's a leftover space.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I think maybe what we can do is we can look at,
place.
playing with that corner a little bit more in a few different ways. I think one of the things that, I can imagine you're reacting to is we have a pretty long throat to get into that, and so it's really pulled it, and it's really stuck it right in the middle. But and if we put a square, it doesn't have to be a square. We can look at how many vehicles, how many bins, what kind of storage shed. We can look at how we can massage it a little bit and see if we can get it a little tighter. We can also play with the version that flips the road down. So we can look at a couple of options based on what we've heard. I think that we would still have the concern if we did not address the intersection for safety and tried to clean it up and make it more of a T. So I think we still want to try and get something that is more responsive to the concerns we've heard about the courtyard, but still try and improve the safety of that intersection.
The one thing for me that remains, and I think that's good that we should think that through. The thing that remains for me is a convenient drop-off for the train and a turnaround.
Yeah,
We talked a little bit about
having a
offline.
turnaround, you're thinking,
Just
yeah.
think, how do you get in there and turn around and come back out, and where do you jump out of the car? If if the parking's full and you're just gonna do a kiss and ride, how do you do it? There's room there on that,
There's
between
room.
Fair Oaks and the building to do something, but
Around the oak tree.
around the oak or to the right, because if it's too tight in there, there's space there. There's a way to do it, we just haven't thought it all the way through.
I will definitely study that. Deference, that is an iconic oak, and it's survived a lot so far.
We don't want to stress it too much.
Yeah.
But it could be on that right side of the road.
Yeah.
It could be somewhere where you get out and walk across.
that entrance like 10 different ways. I think there's a lot of ways. We've hugged it close to the building, had you come from one direction. I think one of the things that we're, we've even talked about, can you come from both sides and ramp partially down and then go in so you can be tighter to the building? But then if that's your only drive-through, are you doubling up so that people can still pass by? Is it confusing? So we've looked at it like 5 different ways. And I think, yes, I think we can, look at maybe you only approach it and get into the garage from station lane, but we felt that people might want to be coming from both directions. So one single central entry would be good, and then giving it enough room to ramp down to get under the building becomes an issue. So we can continue to study it, and I think that there is a solution that will clean it up and make it better. But there are these real constraints about ramp distance down to keep a functional garage that we're wrestling with.
It is, the way it's designed right now, you actually do have to start dropping from here to there.
They can't hear you now.
To get down in this garage, you need about 10 feet of cover above you between the top of the garage and the pavement. And to get that vertical distance, we have to start dropping down right in here. And you're actually going to go down about 2 feet, then we get another 6 feet right in here, and then the building will be designed to adapt to that other 2 feet you have to go. And so that's just one of the ugly realities of it. And we did we had ramps on either side coming down through here. It's a really long, skinny site. And so what it did was it ended up losing all this parking right here. And then this is a really nice oak tree. And as you can see, we're pretty close to it already. So when we had the ramps right in here, it really started to pinch this in there. Yeah. But,
You can look at a few more ideas. I think it can be solved. One of the things, again, we're not designing the shape of the building. I think when you start doing that, you have a lot more options opening up as to how you treat that ramp and get down into the garage. I think the most important thing is that we wanted to make sure it was clear that a road will pass through and connect you to Station Lane, and there is a way to get down to the garage that does not confuse people. Those are the objectives in what you're seeing here, and it may not be the ideal solution in the end, and that's certainly not the way the building's going to look in the end either. So I think it's where do we leave off where we're not crossing the line and trying to design it right now, but we know something will work when you start to shape the building. So that's where we're trying to see if we can find that happy medium. Yes.
Can you say a few words about what assumptions guided projections for the future, and how comfortable you and the staff and everybody feels that after it's built and 5 years later it's too small?
Yeah, and George might speak better to that, but I think our understanding is there really isn't a large amount of growth projected for Atherton. A lot of the positions in the city are contracted out already, and so they're not often full-time, so we have a lot of shared workstations set up in there for staff that might come and go. The police, it was our biggest focus because that was not right-sized in order to even meet criteria for them to function properly. So we've corrected that. But again, we're not in a growth location. It's a no-growth situation in terms of population and services needed. So my understanding is staff felt fairly confident about that, and then the library subcommittee had done quite a lot of their own work to really arrive at what they felt was the right size for the library for the needs being served.
I would just add that when we assume that the only growth in space will be because of regulations, that the state requires a new thing that we have to have because population's not going to grow much. But what we want to do on the interiors of the building is to make them flexible. Just take what people are doing in Silicon Valley, in office space, and make it flexible. So if one department sheds 2 positions and the other one takes on 2, you're not moving a lot of walls. You're just changing cubes.
This suggests that one of the assumptions is that the outsourcing of jobs rather than having full-time Atherton employees in those jobs will continue.
I don't know. I don't think it dictates either way. I think the space is set up to accommodate bodies in the
You said, well,
spaces.
it's outsourced, so you don't need as much space.
Well, I guess I probably didn't phrase that right. It's outsourced now, but the point was that they're not full-time positions, so they could just as easily be permanent staff. But right now, there is not, there are positions in place where people are not there at the same times. And based on projections, that kind of situation in terms of count of staff on any given day is anticipated to be pretty steady.
It was a very small number of positions.
Very small number of positions, and so what we did, as Steve mentioned, is what we focused on then was flexibility. And so, in each department we looked at, okay, but then what's practical for, visiting staff, like every year when you do your, finances and close out the year for the city, or when you might have an upturn in, say, planning applications or building applications and you need to have some extra staff on board. So we've provided in each case a few flex stations, workstations, so that those kinds of things can be accommodated and any department can be using them, if they're positioned right in the final design. So, we've tried to be reasonable, not be overly conservative, but make sure there is that flexibility in case there's a little bit of flex up and down in individual departments over time. In the back.
So do you have an estimated cost on this?
No, in fact, one of the initial slides, we're in the process of developing costs right now. And so we will be meeting with the committee in the coming weeks to be reviewing that information in preparation for finalizing our master plan in January. So we've just begun that process. Yes?
I have two questions. One's related to his about the drop-off for the station.
Mm-hmm.
If we get service back Monday through Friday, one of the things that we tried to get accomplished was having the schools use the Atherton station. They are the private schools that have kids coming from both ends. And we had problems with the drop-off as it was then because of buses being able to make turns around.
Okay.
And you've got a
Okay.
different size issue. So
Okay.
you might want to put that into your.
No, thank you. I think you might be the first person that's mentioned that, so thank you. Appreciate it.
And then my other was just a clarification for myself about the Corporation Yard area.
Mm-hmm.
There will not be, what's the permanent building that will be left over there, or that you're suggesting is over there?
It's a
Just
small
the-
shed. It's not, I don't even think it needed to be as big as what's there now because there's a little bit of workbench, office space, but that.
Public Works has an office. over
Exactly.
there. Is
So
that
they
going to
don't.
move?
Yeah, that's gonna be inside the administration building.
Okay.
So they don't, so all they really need is a little bit of secured storage space, plus their bin space, plus the parking spaces. That's why it's more compressed than what you see out there now.
Okay.
Yes, in the back.
Are there any architectural renditions of what the buildings might look like?
No. We've really been asked to just really do a planning exercise so we can define the project and then the town can proceed with, fundraising and whatnot to move forward with the design process. So we very specifically stayed away from any visuals or aesthetics in representing the look of this. But what we have done and we're doing for the cost estimate is we're describing a level of quality so that the estimates that are provided will capture the kind of facilities that these will need to be in terms of, civic buildings, 50-year type buildings, that sort of thing. So that's really as far as we've delved into any further definition of the look or feel of the buildings themselves and the site.
One of the cost elements that people, at least at the neighborhood meeting we went to, were concerned about was the underground garage.
Yes.
Is there a plan B in case it is prohibitively expensive?
Yeah, Matthew's looked at, if you had to add a bit more surface parking, I think there's ways we can do that. There would be potentially some outbuildings for the police and, there'd have to be an area secured. It would certainly bring down potential parking count if we need to go back and load it up with surface parking. We can relook at the back end and how the courtyard works and put another little parking lot. So we've looked at schemes that add more places for parking. So we know that, that could happen. But one of the things we were finding in just getting started on the cost estimating is you're already putting foundations down there. You're already, excavating, digging down a certain portion. The premium is really not, it's at one level. It's not ramped on multi-levels. So you know, you're getting a lot of bang for your buck starting to build a building in the first place. So I'll be curious when the cost estimate comes back to see if we can define what that premium actually is for just the parking garage.
Sure. Explain that for the police department, their secured parking requirements would be under there.
Yes.
And the underground parking would really be more for staff.
Few
and
visitors.
A few visitor parking spots, a number, but not, that would not be the main reason.
Right, but this would accommodate all the secure parking and all the staff parking.
And evidence
So
storage and.
everything that's up here really can be used by visitors, and it won't be taken up by staff primarily.
It's never a bad idea, Elizabeth, to remind everybody about who's paying for this. How's it gonna get paid for?
Yes,
Because that's
exactly.
probably on everyone's mind. I don't
Right,
know.
okay. So the financial structure is that we have about $2 million in the town's bank account that was collected by the building department since 2000, specifically to create a reserve for getting the building department out of their trailers that they've been in. So that is, that's in the bank, that's a dedicated amount of funds. Of course, the library has their own funds that will go strictly for library development. And then the balance is going to be raised by a capital campaign. And it will only be a reality if the residents come up through a capital campaign and make the donations to build a police department, to build a new administration building. And that's the only way that that's going to happen. There is a group of residents in town who have formed a 501c3 foundation to begin receiving money, and that fundraising effort will be launched, as I've been told, the first of the year in earnest, once we kind of get, you know, a number to kind of shoot for. And the other next step would be EIR process, which we believe will be a pretty, you know, not a really difficult thing to achieve, because we're creating, we're rebuilding something that's already on the site. So look forward to everyone getting excited about the project, and, you know, being able to contribute and be part of the history, the future of Atherton. It's a great opportunity. So, anything else? Did I cover that?
No, I think that's right. And I think the other thing I would comment that struck me tonight that was really different that we've heard so far is train noise. We've
Yes.
always thought about
We've always
noise on this
heard about
project,
it,
but
I think really focusing on some
Yeah.
Well, some people, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and so
been,
this-
it's been heard more in other.
and if there's a
Yes.
way we can mitigate it,
Yeah.
we should look at it.
Yep.
And then it will just come down to, can we raise the money?
Right.
You know, is it something that people want to give money to? And they
Yeah.
may. And maybe it's the quad gate, so they don't hit the horns, we hope, you know, or whatever it is, yeah.
So can you also show this, the phasing, you know, the existing buildings? So a lot of thought in these plans, position of the buildings have been taken to be able to keep our police department in its, you know, operations
Yeah.
and phase.
So you can kind of see on
the
this
white-
drawing, the white,
That's
so,
pretty hard to
so,
see.
you know, the whole building, police and admin right now, kind of takes up this footprint. And then there's a portable building behind the police facility, and then there's an outbuilding, and their lot is kind of in this area. And so one of the things, and then the library is over here right now, and these are the buildings that are barely see some of the buildings, the two buildings over
That's
here.
trailers,
building
the
and
building
planning.
department trailers.
Right. So one of the things that's possible, you know, really the only thing, our primary goal in phasing was to be able to leave the police department in place and move them once and not move them 2 or 3 times. I think everyone else, you know, I think it's going to be a cost comparison issue as to what's going to be the most effective way to execute this project. But our goal was to be able to at least leave the police in place. You know, it might reroute entrances and exits and whatnot during construction. You know, take down the admin half of this building, and, you know, turn over the primary area of the site to the contractor. What we'll be analyzing with staff during the cost estimating process is, you know, is there a real difference in whether you take all of these occupants and put them in temporary space somewhere, bring trailers in at the end of the site or something to give over the whole site to the contractor at once, versus having the contractor phase this first, move people, then do the library and the town hall. A lot of times we find that that might come out to be almost a wash, you know, in terms of, oh, you save some on the contractor's time, you know, by getting everyone off the site at once, but you buy it back in temporary space and vice versa. So we will be studying that, we will analyze it with staff. There will be options, but what we tried to do in looking at this is be mindful of the fact that where we've placed the new buildings does allow you that flexibility to have the most optimal phasing strategy for the most economical cost, and hopefully not have to move the police more than once. So, I mean, that was part of our thinking as well as we landed on kind of final locations for buildings. So, I mean, any other thoughts or questions? I think some of the things we've heard, to summarize, are, you know, the sound walls and the issues with the noise. I mean, take another look at the courtyard placement in roads, maybe develop an alternate so we see it two ways, you know, maybe try and make that a little bit better. The idea of, you know, a drop off or at least a way to turn around here at the end of Station Lane, see what we can do maybe to improve upon, you know, how the ramps are working. Anything else?
The library, or, you know.
Oh.
Relation of the library to town hall.
Situated
Yeah.
library
That'd be worth talking
with
about.
the
Yeah.
town hall.
Eliciting more comments.
Yeah, so I mean,
I think
I
a
want to.
passageway between the two doesn't work.
No, I think they need to be connected.
So if they were connected,
You just raise the grade.
which you can. I mean, you can usually put them all at the same level, and you can figure out, you know, aesthetically when you design it, how you make one look compatible with something glommed onto it. I mean, all those things are possible. So my question would be.
Burn up to the building,
Yeah,
do a grading.
all kinds of things. So I guess my question would be, if we're really hearing a preference toward that,
You're
then
gonna
you'd
have a
really
lot
like them to feel like one facility, nestle the library up to it, and if, in doing so, you know, would you see that these two structures kind of, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, we have some duplication of area in what we've shown as footprints. If we do that kind of consolidation, you know, does that make sense to everyone to actually be able to be more efficient and eliminate some of the program we're currently showing?
Yes.
Is that?
Well, there are two different issues.
There are two different issues.
One is, do people have warm emotional feelings about town hall?
Right.
And could it be a nice room? Which you probably could.
I think you
right?
can.
And then two is, should the two buildings relate to each other? And so one is it a replacement for the multipurpose room? And two is, do the two buildings relate to each other?
Right. I think one of the things that, I think part of the reason that I continue to be reluctant in squeezing them up against each other is, this is a very iconic figure of a building. It's seen as an object. It's shaped very specifically as an object in a field, so to speak. Even the library that kind of sort of connects to the back, it's not right up against it. So it allows you to really appreciate this building as its own entity. And so my concern in squishing the library up to it, you know, is just you lose something there. You have to be very careful how you treat the new structure against that town hall, and you lose seeing the town hall as its own object and an icon potentially of the town. Now, we have heard mixed opinions about how important that is and how many people recognize it as a valuable asset and icon of the town. And I think that we're probably still there with some differences of opinion. So our way of kind of addressing it was give it some separation, acknowledge that you can do breezeways, canopies, connecting courtyards that you would close. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can make them act as a complex if you want to.